No grand plans actually today. Was only to speak of that one topic, which I could have actually finished yesterday and bid a goodbye. But maybe, as I always say, I would want to spend much more time, thoda sour kind of. So I thought I would spend one additional day with you. Don't know whether that really matters to you or not. It really matters to me. Somebody was saying in the morning today that he was seeing students, like visiting students. We have visiting husbands in Nair. We have visiting students. If at all any of you are of that kind, I warmly welcome you for a last class. Abhi ek dusre ko, no, don't look at them. So I would, in today's class, deal with one topic alone, and then I would leave you with an opportunity to interact, talk, whatever. I was speaking about the March rush in the other class. Suddenly people wake up with bundles of loads of tons of questions, which you must have asked in the first week of the course. And suddenly if somebody comes up with 20, 30 questions, you'll have to understand that I'm also a human. I'm neither a Rajnikant nor a Balakrishna. So those of you who must have sent me those loads in the last minute, I don't apologize that I'm not able to do now. I would take them up maybe once the main exam is over. Within a week of time I will be clarifying your doubts or whatever. Otherwise I'm there as long as I'm there alive with you, kind of. I'll see to it that wherever I am, I try to help you out. I go by the formula, once a student, always a student. It's like, that principle in magic, once in contact, always in contact. It doesn't mean that every batch and every year you should be taking the course till your age of the exam is over. It's not that way, but so that topic, because I want to have more time for the personal talk later. Let me finish up with whatever I have to say. Subjects and topics and disciplines you can discuss any time. But personal talk and gossip, you should not miss. You should not miss. The topic of the day is nationalism. That which we feel twice every year, or more probably when a cricket match is there. Abhi aajkal impact of cricket match also has come down, because with changing loyalties, when you have capitalism entering everywhere, you don't really want to represent your country alone at maybe in the area of sports, etc. So it demonstrates that maybe an affiliation to a nation can also be sacrificed if at all you are able to find something much more important to you. Of course, on the positive side, we have been coming across several players or several groups from across the boundaries. You are able to meet with people. That is there. Maybe it is one tendency of globalization, where manpower is traveling across the borders. I don't think that was one of the primary thoughts that must have come to the people when they were speaking of these clubs or these kind of new types of games that are emerging. Nevertheless, for me now, my focus will be on defining certain terms as the practice in the discipline goes. We always believed in defining. So couple of terms that I would take up will be nation and state. Questions come in a combination, nation state, as if they are one and the same, but we would see whether they are different, how different they are from one another. And I am also parallelly giving you the structure. It's like in every concept we have been doing this, we try to define, we say that we can't define. And then we end up writing a list of things. The same thing continues here. So basically it is the skill of handling the things that we are looking for here. If this kind of a technique is mastered by you, a big task can be handled well in the exam. You don't struggle with trying to confirming that yes, this is the definition that we are looking for. So we would start with that, nation and state, how to define. And then at various places in my talk, I will be dealing with some issues like evolution of the concept of nationalism, maybe in general across the world. And when it comes to regions like India, for that matter, what is the major hiccup, major stumbling block in establishing what is called a nation? When I was talking about this last week, a girl was mentioning this thing, that can we depend on the popular history writing where Bipin Chandra says India is in the making of a nation, which he said a long time back. We still memorize the same sentence, and in all our history answers we write, how long will you be making a nation? It's like whether we are going to achieve that particular target of making a nation. That is how generally things are looked at. But for me, is it necessary to make a nation? If at all it is, what are the stakes that are involved? And it is actually that kind of an inquiry that happens in the discipline of anthropology, where we always hail what is called diversity. And that's where I'm beginning to talk about these two terms, nation and state. State we have defined some time back in political anthropology when we said what? State is what? Monopoly of force. Monopoly of force. Monopoly of force. And we are actually trying to distinguish chiefdom from state when we say that it has something to do with the standing army. Anything else that you can recall about what a state is? 3-4 other points. Anything?
Complex political entity, which is very organized in institutions and structures.
Complex. It looks so very funny, right? We say that it is complex, and you say that it is organized, meaning that maybe as we are getting organized, we are becoming complex. Okay, so maybe in terms of evolution, in terms of evolution of political systems, we see that it is becoming complex, and definite role play is there by specific organs within the government or within that particular society. But for all practical purposes, state is seen as something to govern. What could be the basic definition of a nation? Very basic thing, what people...
Something which has physical boundaries and has a distinct culture within.
Physical boundary, distinct. और बताइए sir last में. The intellectual lot from the last. I die to hear you. ఎవరమ్మా చేయి చూపించండి ఎవరు hand feeling of okay and what do you want to do for your nation? What do you want to do for your nation? When you were a child, this question was asked many times in the class. You had answers, now you don't have an answer. You are searching for an answer now. At least those days, nation was remembered every day in the assembly before the school when a pledge was said and the national anthem was sung. I almost forgot national anthem until my son started singing in the house, because there was a huge gap. And I really thanked the government for making it mandatory in the films that you film to aap nahi chodoge. So my question still remains: what do you want to do for the nation? You may or may not take the question. You can say pause. I mean, that's for you to decide. It's not necessary. It is subjective, I know. That's why I'm saying. One should find one's own answer for it. It is not necessary that you do something for the nation. It's not really necessary. As it is said that if you are born human, it is not necessary that you behave human. Who said that it is mandatory? I go by what a friend was saying. Anything else that you want to add? He says that it is an entity which is bound by togetherness.
It is basically a perception, which is not physical, but it stays in the minds of people that we are together or there is common thread which is running. So it is not quantifiable, like it has borders or it has geographical distribution, etc. It's just a perception in the mind of citizens.
బాగా చెప్పారు డాక్టర్ గారు, నచ్చారు. తెలుగు వస్తుంది కదా, వెరీ గుడ్. He stole my heart. We live on many perceptions, actually. We live in the unreal world. And the most potential unreality that we are living with is the concept of nation. At one place it is said, I mean, this is one of the very beautiful books on nationalism, actually. I don't suggest it to you right now, but maybe after you get into service. Perilous Transactions, somebody had written, whoever it is. But then the articles out there, a compilation rather of different people, I think about 30 odd articles are there. Some Indian author had compiled it, but I was trying to look at the feel of nation and nationalism there. Understand this. I wanted to present it in this way, in a nutshell, about what a nation or nationalism is. See, a nation could be an entity which might come into existence the moment a handful of authoritative, powerful, deciding individuals decided that we need to have it. అర్థమైందా? అమ్మాయిలు చూడొద్దు, ఇప్పుడు లాస్ట్ క్లాస్ కదా, నన్ను చూడు. వాళ్ళు వస్తూ ఉంటారు. I repeat what I said. That's why I told you in many classes, especially the girls, don't come late to the class. You distract people, and hence me. I repeat the sentence. Nation is that entity which almost gets established the moment a handful of the powerful, maybe intellectual, decision-making individuals have decided that they should have one. They should have one, O-N-E. Maybe you can think of it in terms of, say, the nations, or I use another word here, the nation or a country. Country is a physical presence. Country is a physical presence. When you say that there are 190 odd countries, we are actually talking about the ones that have got established through geographical boundaries, etc., etc. So when I'm presenting this particular statement to you, if I give you the example of certain nations that still did not get translated into geographical countries, such as what? Catalonia, and Taiwan. ఇంకా చెప్పండి. కుమ్ములాట మొదలెట్టేటట్టున్నావుగా. ఐఎమ్ లుకింగ్ ఫర్ వన్ పర్టికులర్ ఆన్సర్. Palestine. Yes, that is one area that I actually love to talk about, though we may not be able to do much in today's class. See, in the list of countries, even if you pick up the UN document, somewhere Palestine is mentioned. Because there is almost an agreement, there is almost a decision by people that we must be able to have one. So basically speaking, it is something to do with an emotional entity. When I say a nation state, it is a combination of that emotional as well as the political aspects. Now there is something else here. As one of our other friend was saying, nation is something like, can you repeat what you said?
Physical boundary and the people inside the boundary should have a distinct culture.
Distinct culture. You will have to understand here that creation of a nation need not necessarily be based on a distinct or a common culture. Maybe there could be one or a few powerful reasons that made it possible for the creation of that entity. But it is not necessary that there should be rather homogeneity there. So the problem occurs here. At one point of time, we had one major unifying character. That major unifying character is a common enemy, maybe. So the principle that was operating there was my enemy's enemy is my friend. So this entire region became friends because there was a common enemy. That's where you must be writing in your history answers that how the independence movement has got unifying features of that time. So maybe the foreign ruler came as a blessing in disguise. If he was not there, maybe we could not have got unified. See, the problem occurs when there arises certain demands or certain preferences that challenge a huge emotional entity that is a nation. I repeat what I said. See, when I was asking you this question, what do you want to do to the nation, for the nation, answers were not forthcoming, maybe because we haven't thought of it for a long time. It was not necessary for us. When I'm saying that we haven't thought about it and it is not necessary, it means that in the back of mind there were several other things that were given more importance than what is called a nation. See, I may be wrong, these are subjective things. You may be that individual who day in and day out, uthte baithte khate pite, you are only thinking about a nation. You may be an exception. And maybe for me, one other very significant unifying factor is UPSC. So it's like, all of us are trying to move up in the society, trying to, and that is one unifying force where you have different caste groups, regions, trying to address the same kind of a problem. Who gets successful, who is not, that's another question. But then you're all following the same kind of a struggle. The struggle unifies you. Now, it is here that there are certain terms that we will have to look at. I would formally be giving you a note, but then or for that matter, this is not intentionally drawn here, I mean, just to say something. Maybe if they are coming as a challenge, emerging as a big, maybe a challenges, or maybe they have some kind of a different preference. There may be some kind of a different preference when coming to one or a few specific issues. See, suddenly sometimes in life, something that was all the while insignificant becomes so very significant. And that challenges the bigger goals and bigger entities that you had been fighting for or living with. So if I say some kind of a regionalism, some kind of a religionism, or some kind of a linguism, when that becomes a bigger entity, that becomes a challenge. Now, I am coming back to the same statement which we have started with, Bipin Chandra's statement of trying to establish a nation. And we always took a pride in the kind of diversity within which we are living. So right from the beginning, right from the childhood, you were hearing that statement that India is a country, a unit in diversity. And you try to write answers on that, 200 words, 400 words answers for civil services also, unity in diversity. Every time the concluding statement was, see, so many diverse things are there, we are living in harmony, and hence, the sulking pain that exists in the diversity is never reflected. I go back to that statement that I have started with. A handful of people decided that they should have one nation. It has already got established. And who decides is those people who have established. It may, over a period of time, those smaller group of people who established the so-called a nation might play a constructive role, and over a period of time, the rest of them also might come into the fold of what is called a nation. Because those handful of people have already given a guideline. They have given a guideline that, see, if you are a citizen here, if you are a person who is belonging to this particular, the so-called nation, you should be having these virtues. So I'm using these words carefully there. So nationalism is a virtue that people look for. The handful of people who have created might give those diktats to the rest of the people that, see, this should be your way of living. This should be your preferred way. When we are saying all this, several people, see, don't get me wrong when I'm using these words. Several people which we mention as minorities, whether they could be cultural minorities, linguistic minorities, religious minorities, that's where the problem starts. When you want to bring together everybody, every culture group into one and say that, see, this is what is the string within which you will have to live. Different groups are sacrificing different quantities of various things. And we try to impose the so-called nationalism by saying that this has to be, in the interest of the nation, you should be making these sacrifices. So different entities, different minority groups or different populations may be sacrificing different things which are significant for them, which may not be significant for the rest of the people. So when you are trying to bring all this is this popular idea, there shall not be a rainbow, there should only be one color. When you are trying to highlight that one color, the significance of individual beads there is missing, individual colors is missing. But see, this is the reality that living in harmony with diverse cultural groups, that has always been a challenge. And maybe I should be allowed to say this, the kind of harmony that can exist within the rainbow is based on who is supervising the rainbow. Maybe that's where we talk about maybe the Hindu Rashtra or kind of things. When you're trying to impose something, in the name of a religion, it hampers the interest of nation as a whole. Sir, I am not simply taking up examples from this part of the country. See, if you look in terms of when and how the concept of nationalism had emerged, people would look to Western Europe, especially of the French. The popular, the modern notions of maybe equality kind of things, have freedom, those virtues were actually introduced by them. But if we see even today, we find a struggle there. You have laws coming up, strictures coming up from time to time, banning certain practices there. One very popular practice, day in and day out, that is mentioned in the French society is ban of the veil, ban of the parda. See, I'm not trying to say this because I come from a Muslim society. No, it's not that. Don't try to categorize me. I think we are beyond those lines of categorization. Be categorized. This is only one example I am trying to present. Or for that matter, within France itself, we have several groups fighting for the rights of their language. See, it will be much more convenient to find mistakes in certain other people, certain other countries or nations, than trying to say that, see, we have these mistakes and these flaws. Actually, in the scheme of statements, I did not have the Hindutva thing to come in the beginning. I thought I would talk about French first and then somehow. So there we see that there are different linguistic groups. The ones that are associated with the Britons, they are the ones that have been suffering. So that age-old rivalry of Anglo-French kind of a thing that still prevails, irrespective of the fact that you have tunnels, you have this, you have that, several things, but then kadupulo lendu kavalinchukunte vastudha ani you can translate for your neighbor. You can do that later, no urgency, they'll wait. I'm more than happy that people are using Telugu words in communication with me. I felt so very happy. Some boy from Jammu was writing a small paragraph, and then within that I found 4 Telugu words, and in the bracket he was writing the Hindi, translation there. Acha laga, so something like, if not anything else, if not anthropology, you are trying to introduce. And then he was saying this. Once he finishes this main exam, he would want to watch certain movies of Balakrishna. I mean, I thought there cannot be a better compliment than that for me. So my task is done. My advertisement of Telugu industry is done. Going back there to France. This is only one example. People actually try to show the way German society got molded over a period of time in how the concept of nation was imposed much more violently, much more psychologically. Thankfully, we live in this part of the country where things are not imposed on you. People only end up requesting you. Otherwise, you don't listen. Even when people are requesting you, half the time you are not. But there is a possibility that requests, we have some kind of a, what I call, a personality trait. Our psyche is that, the Indian psyche is that, we love people to bow down in front of us. We love people to bow down in front of us. We take pride in that. एक ज़माना ऐसा था, I mean, अभी आप लोग तो खैर मॉडर्न हो, in exclamatory symbol with quotes and underline. There, अभी मैं demand तो ये नहीं कर रही हूँ, but then I'm just trying to give an example there. I don't expect things actually of that kind. That makes me feel much older also. So there was a time when people would aake paunch ho kind of a thing, and then manam gatti hotam kindiki. In some regions the practice is that ab झुक रहे हो, झुकना चाहिए कि नहीं चाहिए, मुश्किल से आधा छू रहे हो, आधा नहीं छू रहे हो. So the thing is, आप नीचे करो, kind of a thing. नहीं इसकी क्या ज़रूरत थी और दबा रहे हो, kind of a thing. So that kind of. Of course, you come from that generation where imposition is actually not accepted. Forget about your own lives, but in general also, social causes also you don't want to take up if at all they are imposed. I think it is the time when the governments, the state has to understand that the nature of communication with the people, it should not be punishment oriented one, maybe a pleading oriented one, that alone can. Because the way people get motivated now are on different lines, not in a very traditional conservative lines. I hope you can go into the details of what I wanted to say. As long as he wants things to be clean, they will not be clean. Until and unless you finally decide that there is enough of mess, I'll have to clean up. So maybe it is something like creating those strings so that you get associated with a common interest. Now I can now look at this part of the world, taking this example. There are different kinds of divisive tendencies. One, I wanted to speak in terms of unification is, of course, we have the single constitution. Those are the common things that we speak of: a common enemy, and then a common law, a common court. And one very beautiful thing that the government has now decided is to change the cadre policy. I really loved this, making it mandatory that you don't work in your region, not simply in your state. You will not be working in your own region. So it's not like you have preference for your state and then second preference could be your neighboring state, so that at least on the weekend I can cross the border and come this side. Or maybe I can function from my house, but then my work is in the neighboring state. Not really done now. You may be posted very much away from your region itself, maybe making it rather possible to build that kind of a unification. I am also actually expecting, and I wish that government also deals with policies such as maybe deputation to making the deputation policies much more stringent, so that you cannot take the advantage of those clauses also. I have nothing against any officers. My husband himself is looking for a deputation, so I don't want to. But then in the heart of the hearts, there are things like this, so that an imposition of the nationhood is possible. When there is no other go, you'll have to stay there, stand there. And I think one other very powerful mechanism which government has been working on is maybe a taxation thing. That a common kind of a taxation. The pinch that you feel in the northernmost point, south also should feel the same pinch, kind of. But amidst the whole thing, petrol and diesel has got its own advantages. That's a different other sad story I found. But now this is the issue. There are diverse things there. And we should not eliminate the thought of things like religion, based on which sometimes it becomes so very difficult to survive together. Religion is a demonstrated entity for us. Religion was a demonstrated entity for us. At one point of time, we decided that, okay, we two cannot live together because we are in the opposite poles. And the old man decides that why lose lives rather than get separated, live on your own way. Maybe that has established a precedence of getting peace. I don't know. I'm not a historian to comment on that. But then I believe that maybe we have laid some kind of a precedence there. That when things go so very awry, so very out of control, that maybe it is better to part off. Because we live in a generation where parting off does not matter much. So if you two are there, one fine day you decide that things are not working well between you, It is already demonstrated in the society that there is an manifold increase in the percentage of divorces. It shows that your tolerance levels have come down. So we are talking about a nuclear family where tolerance levels have come down. If we look at such a diverse country where there is definitely a heavy fall in the tolerance levels, how much ever you speak of a common law, if tolerance was so high, it would not have been taking so much of a time to bring some kind of a civil law that could be commonly applied to everybody. The moment we start speaking about a common civil code, the religious frenzies and then cultural frenzies come forth. This is as far as a general talk is concerned. Now your exam, your syllabus talks about anthropological whatever, role of anthropology in understanding nationalism, etc. Interestingly there, it all depends on how you play with the words to write the answer. Because if at all I have to say in one sentence, nation and nationalism are actually a challenge to the spirit of anthropology. Nation and nationalism are a challenge to the spirit of anthropology, because that is a discipline that always said that you will have to respect diversity. You respect diversity and you don't try to impose. When you, Hanji sir.
Diversity actually antithetical to nationalism. Is diversity actually antithetical to nationalism?
Question or sentence? I said, I am saying it again. As any individual has ups and downs in life, nations also have ups and downs. There would be certain seasons, certain periods, where nationalism is at the highest level. When it is at the highest level, that's how it is said, the first 5-year plan, that was a time when everybody was in very high spirits. Whatever you wanted, people could have done. That was the season of high-spiritedness of nationalism. But over a period of time, when you find diverse interests picking up, which may be countering the spirit of nationalism, then the problem emerges. So their government may be the government may be should be thinking about various ways of handling things. At some places, maybe it may be using a stick. At some places, maybe a carrot could be offered. At some places, maybe you try to pacify the people. Why do you think certain regions are being pacified so much? You don't want you actually don't think before going an extra mile to work out more for them, to give more funds or maybe more facilities. The only intention is that tu reh ja mere paas. But then you are not in the whole story of establishing that kind of idea of nationalism. Maybe somewhere one is knowingly or unknowingly giving lesser importance to the so-called ideas that are challenging nationalism. Because you have what we call standardization there. You have a plane against which you are measuring things. So you think that you have to reach that scale. So it's like whoever is trying to dismantle that platform, I would either deal with them violently or I would try to see to it that I forcefully make them sit with me. That's where is the challenge. We don't say that diversity is against nationalism. No. We cannot actually look for the so-called a nation across the world where you find that kind of a homogeneity. It's only that which is a bigger force to bring you together. Am I clear?
If nationalism is a nation is a perception, how one can decide benchmark? It is not a physical entity.
There is this name, we will be writing about him, Jelner. He raises this question. He says he cannot understand how people are ready to give lives, offer themselves to be killed by others for an entity that is there only in the emotions. If one can answer that question, this question is answered. I don't want to have my own interpretations on that. I don't want to dictate my own interpretations on that. Because at many places, emotions are something that you cannot actually explain. This is one entity with which you really can't. How much ever you try to explain the love for your motherland or for the desire to go back to your fatherland. Fatherland concept, right? And there are instances where you must be reading in the newspapers, Jews from across the country are actually taken back to that part of the world so that at one point of time a Jewish country can be established. The promised land can be given back to them. Of course, what they forget is they should be having a faith to get that. When faith is missing, nothing can happen. Today morning also my husband was saying, in the last class you tell the boys and also girls to have faith in what is given to them. First you have faith in what is given to you. That's very, very important, sir. Otherwise, market is filled with so much of data. There's no dearth of data. So much is there. So I was telling him what is missing in today's world is faith alone. If that was there, ఆయనే ఉంటే ఏదో అన్నారంట. అది తెలుసా? ఆయనే ఉంటే తెలుగు వాళ్ళమ్మా ఆయనే ఉంటే తెలుసా? అరిటాక. Shall I give you that story? There's this proverb. ఆయనే ఉంటే మంగళోడు ఎందుకు? ఆయనే మంగళోడు is barber. There was one lady, quickly in 2 minutes I'll finish the story. Unscheduled story, this one. I told you in one of my classes, what I plan for is not the subject but what I have to do to entertain you. There was one lady, a Brahmin lady. You know the Brahminical practices? When husband dies, you'll have to shave your head. So her husband died. She went in search of a barber. She was going from place to place asking for a barber. So one man whom she met was asking, why are you roaming around for a barber? Why did you not send your husband? Then she says, if he were there, why would I search for a barber? Kind of. అదనమాట ఆయనే ఉంటే I was there somewhere. Where did I stop? So this was the question, sir. When well-to-do writers and scholars, they are actually not in a position to explain why somebody is actually ready to give up one's own life in the interest of something that is there in the imagination alone. Somebody wanted to say something. Sir, Shepherd. మళ్ళీ చెప్పండి. అర్థమైంది, క్వశ్చన్ అర్థమైంది, ఆన్సర్ ఆలోచిస్తున్నా. Is every feeling of a nationhood have a separate country? ఒక నిమిషం ఆగి. It's like this. Why is the need of a formal, legitimate, legal marriage? You can be happy without that. అది కూడా అదే కదా. ఏమి చెప్తివి What else I need in life? Maybe one day will come where an ethnic group of anthropology students, whatever is formed. So anthropo-nationality. Maybe you would want to create a nation, country there with Ashoknagar as a geographical boundary. అర్థమైంది.
తెలుగు వాళ్ళందరూ ఒకటి అన్న తెలుగు నేషన్
అవును
కంట్రీ కాకుండా నేషన్ అంటే వన్నెస్ కదా.
అవును అవును
దర్ ఇస్ నో నీడ్ ఆఫ్ ఎ కంట్రీ ఆర్ సపరేట్ ఫిజికల్ బాండ్. బట్ నేషనలిజం ఫీలింగ్ అంటే మనము పాకిస్తాన్ కూడా ఇంతకుముందు ఒకటే కాబట్టి అప్పుడు నేషనలిజం సంథింగ్ డిఫరెన్స్ ఉంటుంది కదా. మనం ప్రధాని కుర్డ్స్ పాలస్తైన్స్ కెటలన్స్ ఇట్లా సపరేట్ నేషన్ అంటే కంట్రీ లాగానే అనుకుంటున్నామా అని.
మంచి ప్రశ్న అడిగావు, మంచి సమాధానం చెప్తావు. Have a look at that. I didn't want to bring that in the class because you have said this. Is it necessary that every national feeling be represented by a geographical entity of a country? You are together, fine. You have that feeling. So I'll answer it in two parts. One is there a necessity of a country? Second one is, within the same country, within the single country, is the spirit of a common nationhood is there? If at one point of time that common nationhood misses out, what would happen? Just have a look at that. Maybe you started with a small group of, I can say that commonality, maybe tribalism, maybe some kind of anism, one small group is coming up. Actually, this is all the inquiry into the concept of ethnicity. We have come up with that word ethnicity. Ethnicity is a strong we feeling. So based on what is the content that is binding you, the size of the group might vary. We said at that time, in the concept of ethnic boundaries, there can be different entities that might give rise to different ethnic groups. And at that point of time, I told you that nation is a much bigger ethnic group. And now you see here, there can be different levels before you attaining what is called a nationalism. But that is not the end of it. You can have much more than that. This is one variant, one thinker writes, cosmopolitan humanism, or globalism for that matter. So nation is only one level of ethnic identity. It is not the end of it. Like at one point of time you were asking a question, kya tha wo? Vasudhaiva Kutumbika, where we have seen that you are trying to establish that emotional commonality beyond the level of your community, beyond the boundaries. So nation is only one intermittent stage. Now I am coming back to your question now. Finally, there has to be a purpose. You have a common feeling. Feeling పెట్టుకుని ఏం చేసుకుంటావు? Basically, feeling is there. What is the end of the feeling? There has to be something substantial. So it is at this level we are coming up with one kind of a solution where maybe all the people who are having that common spiritedness might live together, might face the life together, kind of a thing. Vintunara Devender? So for me, it gives some kind of stability. It gives some kind of staying together and progressing together because you have some kind of a commonality there. Otherwise, what would really happen? See, I have a spirit of nationalism, and I'm living with Australian Aborigines, you are living with Veddas, somebody else is living with somebody, and you say that, see, all of us who are there at different places, we all have a common feeling and ethnicity. Living together becomes essential, and where you can actually assert your the feeling of unification. Of course, did you follow what I'm saying? Sometimes, the emotion has to be translated into objective, tangible, verifiable, physical entities. Did you understand? Don't ask me to repeat the sentence. Emotion occasionally has to be translated into tangible entities. So nationalism is an emotion, country is an entity. That gets strengthened through several symbols. So when you write a note, you are going to write about these symbols also. Turner uses the symbol studies. We used the name Dembu at that time, but he was talking about what national flags can do. National flag is not simply a cloth of few meters. It has that magical power. Roja సినిమాలో అది పడతా ఉంటుంది. రోజా ఫ్లాగ్ కింద పడుతున్నప్పుడు మంటలో ఉంటుంది, ఫ్లాగ్ ఫైర్ అవుతూ ఉంటుంది, అండ్ దెన్ అరవింద్ స్వామి వుడ్ జంప్ అండ్ ట్రై టు, బికాస్ దట్స్ ద ఆనర్ దట్ యూ గివ్ టు ద నేషనల్ ఫ్లాగ్. Of course, now we have a possibility of wearing the national flag also. With restrictions, of course, you can't wear below your waist. It's a different story. There could be countries where, advertisement of national flag can happen. National flag knickers. No? You have the American, ఏమంటారు దాన్ని, అది boxers, whatever. Can I go? Any questions so that I can further my discussion? जी सर बताइए.
So they had come together as a politically a nation. But was the feeling there in East Pakistan and West Pakistan was similar? No. So because of that, at a later point of time, in about 23 years, it separated out. But did it happen in a few months or few years, or is it from the beginning itself there was a discussion?
Maybe there was something like a superimposition of the kind of a nationhood on them.
Yeah, it was a superimposition, which is evident.
So now the question is, going back to the question, can you repeat the question?
No, I don't have a question, but what I want to say is the definition. I have a problem with the definition which you have given for a nation. I feel it is a political definition. It is a definition of a nation on terms of politics. For me, nation is a feeling of oneness, which may be based on culture aspect, which may be based on a geographical aspect, which may be historical aspect, or it may be an ethnic aspect also.
I think we have said that. In ethnicity, there can be different parameters. One, based on certain parameters, at one level, you can call nation also as an ethnic group. And once again, going back to the definition, see, we are going to the first class again. I have my own definition, you have your own definition, she has her own definition. If 1,000 people we ask, we give the different kinds of definitions. But one common theme there is the psychological, the emotional attachment that you have to that entity. So when I'm saying a psychological, emotional attachment, I don't think I'm focusing more on the political thing. But then when you say nation and state together, there has to be a combination there. Are you okay, sir? Can I continue with my?
India becoming a nation because of the foreign invaders or British so far. I feel India was a nation not because only what was lacking was a political unity. Since time immemorial, like we can relate to parts of Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan as a nation for ourselves. We never felt that part of Arab or Persia was our part. Traditionally, going to history also, we feel that parts of Afghanistan, parts of now Pakistan are ours.
We have a feeling towards them. But we never had that feeling for
I have a feeling for Iran also. That's also ours only. Okay. Okay.
like if you go to any country, there are some percentage of people who don't feel with the oneness of that country. Any country for that matter. I said that the level of illness is different. The degree of illness is different in any country. The more it is, the more we feel that it is.
So the idea you have is India was already a nation. It's only that political.
Only what was lacking was political unity. I can term it as a competitive federation kind of thing.
Maybe.
Culturally or historically, we are always one. And the geographical boundary of the subcontinent is
Maybe then the very popular statement that we have started with, that is Bipin Chandra's statement, that comes as a challenge. So I have nothing to challenge actually. मेरे लिए तो बस ये था कि कुछ बात कर लूँ क्लास में, like I generally do. I told you in the very first lesson, I mean this. अब वो कितना भी बात करें वो उतना ही है, तो इट्स लाइक इंडो पाकिस्तान टॉक्स ओनली. अब बात कर रहे हो जो करना है कर रहे हो, काइंड ऑफ ए थिंग. तो डोंट टेक इट सीरियसली टू द हार्ट. फॉर मी दिस इज़ अ वेरी इमोशनल concept that cannot be imposed by anybody simply either by force or by law. Unless otherwise you feel for your nation, there's nothing that people can do. So it is basically based on that emotional thing. And see, when he was giving that statement, maybe he was looking at his own parameters. Why India was still in the making of a nation? Because maybe he was looking at the warring factions or the differences of opinion that are there that had to be soothed at that point of time. So that was how things were. Now coming back to what he was speaking about, one is whether a physical entity was necessary. Physical entity, I thought that maybe it is necessary so that you get substantially an opportunity to live together and fight for your own thing or kind of progress or what. Second thing is, which one came first? Is it the state or the nation? It may not be the case everywhere. It may not be the case everywhere. State, when we are saying that it's a political entity at the highest complexity level, there can be nation-like ethnic groups. Need not necessarily be nation. There can be nation-like ethnic groups even without a state. When we say state, we are talking about one particular level of political institutions. Maybe there can be chiefdoms, there can be certain other political entities where there is a possibility of having that kind of a ethnic identity. I hope you are getting what I am saying. Or is it that nation can be a result of a state? We are talking about most of the political entities now. There was one article I was trying to write in book number 4, which I will be sending a soft copy again because people have complained that there is some print problem there. Don't worry about it. In that article, I was trying to make a mention of this, that there is always a danger if you first create a state and impose a nationhood on them. The reason why a large part of Africa had been struggling with that kind of an ethnic strife was basically because when you are creating a nation, when you are creating a state, you did not consider the emotion that is involved there. So when you were drawing boundaries, it was like, half of the region of an ethnic group falls in one country, the other half is on one. There may be water holes and their pasture lands are there in one the so-called country or the nation, and rest of it is in the other. You actually cannot respect the boundary there, The one that is now being guarded by some forces, some armed forces, which is actually a monopoly of the nation at that particular point of time. So this is one other dimension anthropologists argue about, which one comes first. See, in anthropology, most of the time we pick up stories and questions which have chicken and egg relation. Which one must have come first? One is giving rise to the other. Now coming back to the second part of what I was wanting to talk about. The emotion of a nation is not permanent. The emotion of a nation is not permanent. So it all depends on how, through your legislations, through your various other mechanisms, you are trying to build. That's the reason why right from your childhood you are having this special courses of moral science. I don't know what morality we learnt there, but moral science, where we see things like respect for a nation, patriotism kind of things. They are also being taught. The only idea is at one point of time when you become citizens, you be responsible. You don't question the existing entity, the very emotional entity of a nation. That's where the whole thing ends. I'll once again give the structure of it. We here are trying to write an answer to this question: to what extent anthropology, the knowledge of anthropology, had been used in explaining the concept of regionalism or nationalism. As conventionally done, we try to define terms. We try to bring certain examples to show which one has come first and what are the forces that bring together the so-called national group. And people also have commented in the discipline about permanency or lack of permanency of that particular concept. And we end your story by saying that, see, this is a discipline that believes in respecting the diversity. And when the diverse interests are not actually taken care by the so-called majority, the minority, through its suffocation, tries to damage the interest of the majority as a whole. And then the spirit of nation comes into, Am I clear to you? So now with various statements and various case studies, you try to make an answer. Keep writing, sir, for maybe 10 minutes. I'll do it in a short way. I'll begin with this man. Keep writing, sir. Nationalism defined by Gellner. Nationalism defined by Gellner is primarily, sir, you may differ with the definitions, but I am giving you a standard one, standard answer. You are free to question, dismantle, or whatever. Nationalism is primarily a political principle that holds that, which holds that the political and a national unit should be congruent. Nationalist sentiment is a feeling of anger aroused by a violation of this principle. or the feeling of satisfaction aroused by its fulfillment. For Gellner, nationalism is a theory of political legitimacy, that requires ethnic boundaries which should not be at loggerheads, loggerheads ante enti head on head, which should not be at loggerheads with a common emotionally binding force of a nation. Emotionally binding force of a nation. Keep writing there. Nationalism also refers to a community of integration, with cultural and self-identity, wherein the feel of commonness may be abstract and anonymous. Underline the words abstract and anonymous. Right in the next paragraph. Contemporary writers on nationalism. Anderson defines nationalism as the result of coming together of emotional power and political legitimacy. He traced origins of concept of nationalism. Concepts of nationalism to the French society where nationalism was demonstrated as an ideology. He dealt with several possibilities of ethnogenesis, that is, emergence of different ethnic groups. Keep writing there. For Anderson, nationalism strengthens solidarity between otherwise opposite culture groups or features, such as the poor and the rich, the poor and the rich, the propertyless and capitalists, the propertyless and the capitalists. Keep writing there in the next paragraph. Anderson tried to explain nationalism from the perspectives of kinship and religion. From the perspectives of kinship and religion. For him, nation is one level of or one degree of the feel of togetherness, the feel of togetherness. He describes nations and their personalities as the ones similar to the personalities of individuals. You must have studied in international affairs the writings of people like Noam Chomsky, who says that nations are nothing but glorified individuals. Like how individuals behave, these are nothing but, it's one personality rather. Like how you have your own emotions, your own personal traits, nations also have. We already have come across this in the topics of national character studies. If somebody was listening to this statement of Chomsky for the first time, that nations are glorified individual personalities, that might be something that people cannot understand. But after you have read about national character studies, I think there should be a doubt there. Keep writing. Kinship and religion were examined by him in the regions of Arabia and South Asia. Among Arabian tribes and in the northwest frontier region, that is contemporary Afghanistan, affinities are mostly on the kinship or at the most tribe level. This is the primary reason for a constant strife in the Northwest province where establishment of a nation by convincing warring factions has been a difficult task. He refers to Southern Asia, where religion at one point of time led to parting of two important religious groups, giving way to establishment of two different nations. Right in the next paragraph. Anderson and Gellner refer to nationalism as a seasonal character, by which they meant that with the emergence of new affinities, there can be a challenge and a threat to the basic foundation of the nation. Anderson discusses the questions of, number one, nationalism against the state. Secondly, nation state versus the world markets. Thirdly, nationalism without ethnicity. Take the first one, nationalism against the state. Instances such as linguism, right in the brackets, based on his fieldwork in France, where the Briton and other linguistic groups functioned in competition and friction. When you say Britain, I mean Bretton. Close the bracket. And emergence of regionalism with an effort to protect one's own culture, such as, right in the brackets, study of Quebecs or Catalonians, in the Basque country, BASQUE, అది కొట్టేసి సింపుల్గా ఏం రాస్తారంటే Catalonians in northern Spain. Catalonians in northern Spain. Keep writing there. Bracket close. He refers to use of communication, television and media as a powerful mechanism of acculturation or imposing common culture. Read what you have written so far.
Catalonian independence, it's made mainly, I mean, that's basically due to the economics, right? So, can we say as the capitalism grows and spreads, so the nationality, I mean, the question of nationality and nationalism, whatever we are trying to plug, that will be reduced. Can we say? Because
You can say that.
that depends only on economics in the future.
Atlas in the Atlas? You have Atlas with you? Anybody having Atlas here? Africa map this year. The question, Master, Pillalu, Amma, Vinandi. I asked you to read what you have written. You are establishing discussion forums. Our friend was asking this. In many cases, due to strengthening of capitalistic ideas, is there a possibility of weakening the spirit of a nation? Quite possible. See, there are two things here. One is having a congruity or continuation in the geographical territory. He was also making a mention of this Bangladesh and kind of things. If you are slightly far from the major land, there is a possibility that the feel of togetherness wither away. That is the reason why I always say that you keep your partner with you every time. You let her go, she would go, kind of. Continuation, the continuous presence is what is important. I was looking at this. I'll come to the picture what I was. This is one. And having been away from the main territory, and if at all you are somebody who is contributing mostly to the economy, you wouldn't want to stay with the one. Back home you can do this, a very popular story to substantiate this. The country of Angola in the southern Western Africa. The country of Angola, this has got several small lands that are far from it. If you observe along the western coast, you have small territories such as Kadimba, which is a constant bottleneck for them. A small one, if you could observe, that is less than, say, 2% of the entire Angola. And I go by the same principle. It is away from the mainland. So there is a less grip of the mainland on that place. It must have so happened that in our case also it had happened. When the colonial ruler was going away, he was saying that, see, these lands belong to you. And we started to claim them. In that claim, what must have happened is that some of the territories that we are claiming were not really happy with us for various reasons. In this particular case of Angola, the region of Cadimba, less than 2% of the whole Angolan region, was actually responsible for more than 85% of their economy. And it will be like the small fellow taking care of the big thing. Why will he do that? So you can go back and see the resource map, what was happening there. There was some small river there. And then on the other side of the bank you have, and then there's one other country that is interspersed between the Cadimban and Angolan territory. And when this happens, so it is as simple as when I am saying Noam Chomsky's statement that countries behave like individuals. Countries behave like individuals. They have their likes, dislikes, their emotions, their anger. They're nothing but individuals. They also have envy, they also have anger. They are also selfish. So when Cadimba was taking care of so much of the territory, at one point of time, they started to have losing that interest of the nationhood there. As such, the country was established, the nation was established without taking all the people their consent. Without taking their consent, the nation was established. It was, of course, superimposed. After having accepted the superimposed territory, if one small region, one part of it, decides that, see, I don't want you, there the problem starts. So when he was talking about capitalism, if money becomes important, trade becomes important, certain other things have picked up. It is one other seasonal thing. It is one other seasonal thing. You will not be in the same emotional state every time. There are ups and downs. Sometimes you have so much of affection towards the country, towards the nation at some point of time. So if at all that kind of an emotion has to be sustained, maybe from time to time you will have to do certain exercises. The governments have to take up certain exercises that from time to time rekindle the kind of affection, the kind of togetherness that you have. This is when you are in a separate territory. But from within the same territory, if you are operating, if I feel that I am rich in resources, my richer resources are exploited by you, you are not sharing the benefits with me, somebody else is taking away my resources, I would have another kind of a disturbance in mind, that maybe I would say that this region is mine, I don't want to share my resources with you. That is one other kind of a challenge that comes. So everything said and done, I'll come. Everything said and done, emotions take a beating when capitalism enters. Sir.
Can we say something about nation state and capitalism going together a bit negatively, like something what Karl Marx said or something like that, stateless society? That would put nationalism in a negative term. Can we write something of that sort?
Don't worry that you should not write. Don't worry that you should not write. The concept itself is so very value-laden. The concept is value-laden. Nationalism is a value. When I say value, I may think that you are imposing on me, or I may accept it. Sir, come out of this mindset that what will the examiner feel if I am writing this? Exam is, after all, no, don't get me wrong. Exam is, after all, an opportunity to express yourself. How best you are expressing, that's what matters. So what we generally call diplomatic, presenting the nastiest thing in the nicest way, that's how it is. It all depends on how you are communicating. You wanted to say something? I stopped somewhere. This is something very interesting, sir. The last statement that you have written, television and media as powerful mechanisms of acculturation and imposing common culture. So we were already having down south, we were already having thousands of hundreds of rituals for every occasion, as if they were insufficient. The Bollywood had done the damage, and then daily soap operas have done the necessary damage. So you started to emulate every damn thing the rest of the world was doing. At one point of time in history, we had marriages of 16 days. 16 days marriages. 16 minutes is suffocating. Talk about 16. I remember my own marriage that got finished in less than 10 minutes. We both had this problem of standing on the dais. We kind of, standing on the dais is very discomforting. In class hai to theek hai, I mean, this is a different platform. But sabhi kuch aapko camera ho raha hai and then everybody is looking at you and as if something is going to happen. Kind of. 16 days to bahut badi ho gayi. And now with all those kinds of ceremonies that we are adding, we are going back to the same, like how we have the parabolic evolution. We are going back to the same thing. And somehow I wanted to say this on this platform today that because some of you who are from outside the Telugu zone, you were feeling uncomfortable when I was giving some of the examples. So I was saying to one of our friends that maybe from the next batch I would try doing a lot of exercise on the Bollywood also. The problem is, as you are going north, mostly as you are going north, you are going away from the reality. As you are going north, you are going away from the reality. If you see the Tamil country, the very rugged kind of movie that you produce, which brings out the reality in the most naked form. As you are going north, the Himalayan expectations, and then the glorified kind of things that you picturize. No, there can be some kind of instances where you try to bring the reality, but then most of the time, the Gana Bajana ho raha hai, dance kar rahe, and then kind of a thing. You are actually living in the fantasies. So that's the only problem. That's what. Keep writing, sir. The acculturation element occasionally results in a threat to the survival of cultures of smaller groups or regions. When such an element snowballs, that can create a threat to nationalism. So you shall not neglect any small disturbance as a smaller one. There's a possibility that things would slowly get piled up, and then, so secondly, nation state versus world markets. Nation state versus world markets. So don't understand market in the traditional sense of a market, where hawkers are there, where buying is happening, and that's not the market we are speaking about. Or maybe we are speaking about a global scene, or a relation between one smaller entity with a bigger a global entity, where several transactions are happening. Keep writing. In the context of global transactions, the identity at the level of a nation, comes to be established through mechanisms of warfare, sport, or manufacturing, and establishing one's own self economically in the distant lands. Occasionally, a struggle for this identity can take violent forms, becoming a concern not simply for the emotional attachment to the ethnic group called nation, but also for the survival of groups within. It is here the winning over of the minority by the majority becomes crucial. Keeping and respecting interests of the minorities for the survival and progress of the majority becomes a choice. Thirdly, nationalism without ethnicity. This can occur in two instances. One, creation of nations, right in quotes that, creation of nations or countries without considering or taking into confidence the stakeholders involved, such as the emergence of several nations in Africa. Secondly, in polyethnic groups, in polyethnic nations, the constantly changing affinities to a different parameter of belongingness creates a threat. Right in the next paragraph. Anthropologically, the concept of nation was considered a challenge to the explanations of respecting diversities and protection of interests of especially the aboriginals. Non-ethnocentric writing in the concept of nationalism has always been a challenge. The subject matter of the discipline has been revitalized after 1990s to provide academic ways, opinions and discussions to bring out various situations from across the globe in order to provide broader academic and practical guidelines to the governments, state, or the people in deciding positions to handle the situations. Right, in the next paragraph. In this context, Dr. D.P. Sinha in his article Tribalism, Pluralism and Nationalism opines that, right in the next line in bullet points, in several countries including India, the discussion is not about what is the major mechanism of bringing togetherness. It is actually the game of real power, and who holds the power to decide things. In the process The idea and affiliation to the nation faces a challenge. Continue writing there. In the context of tribalism or regionalism, for him, it is not whether the principle of exclusion of non-tribals or it is not the inclusion of the non-Hindu groups to be assimilated into the mainstream. It is actually about how the process is designed. That is, whether the people involved, whether the people affected are involved in the power game. See, people might differ that nationalism is not a power. Nationalism may simply be an emotion. Emotion somewhere or the other has to exhibit itself. That's where things are. What I will do is, this is for the people who can do with a bit of interest an extra thing. There is this book that runs into I don't know how many pages, some about 200, 300 or so. It is only for the people who would want to do a bit more, maybe who would want to write an essay on that, if an essay comes on this topic. See, if a question on nationalism is asked, what will you write? You may say that it's a feeling of emotion. You may say that you are ready to kill yourself. You may say that you are ready to kill others. Beyond that, what? That's where it is. I'll share this document. Several anthropologists are there in that. Spend time, because anyway, after your course is over, you don't know what to do with the surplus time that you got. Suddenly you find more time. Maybe somewhere down the line, we got used to each other. I troubling you, you getting troubled. Don't trouble the trouble. Now my son has got that acumen of delivering that. So early in the morning, he gets up and says, I'm not the trouble. And then kind of, bahut sahi ja raha hai. I sometimes feel that he's becoming a much better movie buff than what I am. So today also his revision was going on in the morning. A revision of kuch tha, pata nahi yaad nahi. I have something else to offer to you. I always believe in a formal beginning and a formal ending of the process. I would take about 10 minutes of yours here. We started with that. I invited you. somewhere in June, July. I don't know whether you have visited, but still my invitation is there. I can accompany you to the Chudi Bazaar. We decided over a few things. We thought of that. I did not prepare any new slides. I was picking up from what I have shared with you. I said this was our Panchashil. If you could recall, I said this was our Panchashil. Neglect any one of them, you will have it. And I also, throughout the course, at many points of time, I tried to screw you by saying that, see, have this trust, follow this. If you are questioning, you would come back. Because so much is involved. He was telling in the morning, so much is involved. So much is at stake. Your emotions, family's economies, your economies, your age, biggest thing at stake. What you're losing, you don't know. We started with that. I am trying to trace the major points that we have. And I'll also have to say certain things to you towards the end. So that's how things are. We started with that. We said that you should be thinking like an anthropologist. I know most of us have started thinking. Like whom, I don't know, but you started thinking. That's the first step, actually. You started using what you were not using earlier. Using is very important. Use and disuse theory. We started with that. Several of the other people, bearded fellows, non-bearded fellows, and then kind of. We also had narrated the stories of why beard, why not shaving, kind of a thing. You remember? So there was a lot of journey. We went into ethical arguments, unethical arguments, what we do, what others do, kind of. And we said that we have to understand, this is where we were. Actually, I said this in that class. My idea is to make you try to understand the other's perspective. See, I never promised that I would teach anthropology. I never promised. I still am on that promise. Knowledge deliverance was never my priority. I only wanted to show you an experience. I only wanted to show you what the discipline actually offers. And I said that many times, that as a byproduct of the entire exercise of experience sharing, if at all you get a service, that's a bonus. But otherwise, no. So we said there are several problems there. He was talking about anthropology country. Within the anthropology country, there can be different emic opinions. Why you choose anthropology, what's the problem, kind of a thing. And we went through that man. We were looking at people who were very obviously there, believing in the things that we see. And we also had spoken of the people who did not see but believe. And then we started seeing our present, our past, trying to understand the present from the archaeological remains. That was one of the things that was going on at Langhnaj, a site that was explored by. Thank you. And then I showed that to you. Without this, I could not have. And several other such episodes where I was trying to share my very personal, deepest feelings. And we were also seeing how things were moving. You were becoming complex, complicated. Complex is different from complicated. Most often we become complicated. We are not simply complex. So we were trying to look at various sites, several maps. We were asking you to draw. Some you have drawn, some you left it for the future. And we were also trying to trace how things were in the past, mechanisms of tracing the past, with a final goal of attaining moksha in UPSC, the step-by-step process that was actually recommended to you. These are the ideals actually. We already know that ideals are good to be seen in the books and not to follow in practice. That's the reason why many things that we have said as rules of the course, we have set them aside long time back. We have seen that. Several things out there. We moved on into religion, different theories of religion, and then different practitioners of religion. I don't think have shown this picture to you, but I love that color, skin tone, not the dress color. So maybe I thought, పురోహితుల్లో కూడా నువ్వు అది చూస్తే ఏం చేయలేము. And then we went on to begin with some discussions on physical anthropology. We said there is diversity, we said we love race, we love language, and I was also talking about various ways in which you can communicate to the people. You need not every time talk. You can show things in different ways. And then parallelly the gentleman was coming, unfolding the secrets of cell to you and the disease to you, and kind of, so I was also trying to contribute through economic and political discussions. Various thinkers were coming and going into the class. Some we were holding, some we were leaving, and we were also getting fascinated by this exercise. And then we were preferring some of them, or many of them, all of them. Edaithe enti. I did not want to fill the gap. And then we also were trying to establish the families, the localities. We were finding it difficult in the explanations of the tribals, what we have and what we do not have. We were talking about problems of tribals, education. You remember this picture we have shown in that class? Scratching endlessly, the male fellow. And then we were looking at the forests, the policies therein. Several of the provisions you were supposed to memorize. I was also giving certain assignments there, such as social forestry, joint forest management. I have been waiting for them to come. Not many have come on that. Sometimes we have to wait for a long time to get what we want. Several of the populations have been waiting in their quest for their own identity. In that context, I asked you to go through several movements. These were some of the pictures that I was sharing, the problems of shifting cultivation, etc. We also, on the sidelines, were enjoying such things in the political anthropology, how a resolution of a dispute can happen. Every time you need not have to use a gun or a weapon. You can use several other things to solve the dispute in a more amicable way, on a more permanent way, without any kind of negative feel or hatred out there. Maybe, if at all we look back and see in our own lives, you must be having somebody in your life who must have deeply hurted you at one point of time. Maybe sometime today, if at all that person crosses the road, how you actually feel looking at him or her. Is it that you feel something like a transparent sheet there that is simply walking away? It doesn't bother you? Or maybe that you would want to once again go back and pick up your knife and butcher him or her? That's how things are. Every time butchering may not be necessary. That's how the thought. And then we introduced him to you. Or maybe we are introducing your own self to you. The problems of men and then the problems of women. We spoke about them also because they deserve a special mention. And then we said that there is something that is desirable, something that we should have, something that we should not have. Somebody was telling us. I think this particular list I did not share with you in the cold temperature adaptation, which I will be sharing with you. There were a good list of case studies there, especially by Hamel. He was talking about, and several others were talking about how cold can be handled. And then we were speaking of that. Villages at one point of time were important. They don't seem to be so very important now. That's where we are actually heading towards. What is important today may not be important tomorrow. What is important today may not be important tomorrow. So you see, you have a checklist of what is important today. And that's how things are. That's what I had promised to you, the experience, not a knowledge. And I think I was successful in not delivering any knowledge to you, and you also fulfilled the promise by not getting any knowledge and only an experience. Nevertheless, this was my focus. Those who were there throughout, they were there throughout. Those who were not there, they can never be there. I said so. Because somebody was saying the other day that in the beginning it was very difficult for me to get a seat in the beginning, in the front row. Now I can get any time in the class. So it shows that there was a falling fanfare there. Or maybe there was a falling interest in the discipline itself. Or maybe UPSC itself. UPSC tests you for your perseverance. Constantly asking, pursuing, requesting, pleading, performing. Don't know when finally the Lady Luck smiles on you from UPSC and UPSC would open its doors welcoming you. It cannot happen so very easily. A miraculous thing. Sometimes what happens is you have done every bit, you did not get it. And at one point of time you lose hope, you give up. And then UPSC shows a hope to you. The other day I was talking to one of our very old students. He gave up everything 4 times. He went to the interview, didn't do it. And this time he got settled in some other country, got married and things like that. And after a couple of years he thought that, okay, I will once again give for maybe the Trump reason, I don't know what. Then he applied for preliminary. He came, he gave the exam and went. He was not really sure whether he would clear. He cleared, he came back, gave the main exam, went back. I mean, he was coming back for the main exam, then he was calling saying that, no, this comes like a surprise for me now, whether I should. Because when he was doing every bit, things were not so very promising. Now he was not doing anything at all. He was landing one day before the exam, writing the exam and going back. And when he was going back, he did not go prepared that, okay, I would clear the exam, I would have to come back to write. That's where he was saying maybe UPSC has to do online examinations kind of a thing. Ho sakta hai. Anyways, that was what I was. Second one, very importantly, preparing students to score high. Pehle likhna to shuru karo. Many times it becomes difficult for me to hold your hand and make you write. I would have done that, but not really possible. And yeah, people purchased many of them. There still has to be an opening ceremony for most of them. A ribbon cutting has to happen. And interestingly, yesterday I get a mail. Can you give me the list of books that I can purchase? So I was checking the date of the mail. ऐसा तो नहीं कि 4 महीने बाद आ रहा है. But no, it was written yesterday night. But finally you have opened your eyes. I am thankful for that. That's what, every time. I might have failed many times in entertaining you. I'm sorry for that. Before I actually wind up, I, from the deepest of my heart, have to convey thanks to some of the people without whose support I don't think things would have been possible. Without him, I don't think. That is the fellow. I wish I could bring him here today, but waiting for 3 hours would be a difficult thing. And also that maybe he always wanted to sit on this chair. So maybe it could have been a major disturbance for him, and that too he was having an outing from the school today, so I didn't want to disturb him. So my thanks to him. Have a good time. I didn't want to show my husband's photo because many girls are here, so. There was one other thing I forgot to actually mention to you. I had said this earlier also, that not all the topics would be requiring the same amount of attention. And I was sticking to that. Whichever topics were more important, you had to give a lot of time. And just because, looking at the amount of time that is required based on the marks, we must have distributed as such. But as far as concept building is concerned, I have never compromised. And whatever is the syllabus that is given to you, we were trying to supplement from different sources. And after having all that, if at all any problem you find anywhere, you try to point out, mail it to me so that I can help you out. Okay? Have a good time. Thank you. Once in contact, always in contact.